Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Shout Our Struggle podcast. We're at episode 7 already. Kind of crazy that we're at 7 episodes. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but we've covered a lot of information so far on this podcast. Today's episode, I am bringing on my friend Isa, who's absolutely amazing. I'll let her introduce herself to you. I know you're going to love her. I know you'll love her story, and I really think that she will be so helpful with a lot of different challenges that we're facing today. A few announcements, some housekeeping. Shout Our Struggle is partnered with the Mental Health Association in New Jersey. They are an amazing group of people who are working very hard to change accessibility and education about mental health in the state of New Jersey, and they are an affiliate of Mental Health America. The Mental Health Association of New Jersey has their 15th annual Walk for Wellness in Cranford, New Jersey at Nomahegan Park on June 11th. I have formed a team for Shout Our Struggle, so if you're a Shout Our Struggle listener, a Shout Our Struggle lover, that information can be found at the link tree in my bio on Instagram. It should be the top little thingy. That's so not specific, I'm sorry. It should be the top button on the link tree. It says join my Walk for Wellness team, and you can come along with me and support mental health accessibility and education in the state of New Jersey. So let's bring Isa onto the podcast.
Hey, I'm Isa. I am 22 years old. I'm based out in Winchester, Virginia. I'm a current graduate student on the way of getting my master's degree in public health. I have a bachelor's degree in public health, and I'm a Latina. And I am married at 22 years old. And I have definitely had a lifelong struggle with my mental health ever since I was a little girl, with generalized anxiety, and body image and body dysmorphia. And yeah, I've had to come to terms with kind of the way that my brain works, and I've had to learn to work with it and not against it, just through identifying my emotions and being able to analyze them, and through therapy, through talk therapy. I use BetterHelp. Love that platform. Definitely 10 out of 10 recommend. And yeah, so I've had to struggle a lot with my body image. I went through a major weight loss. Belle probably remembers how I looked when I first met her. I lost over 80 pounds after a gastric sleeve operation. That definitely snowballed into its own little issues. But I'm definitely grateful for the fact that I've been able to work through my mental health struggles. And I'm happy to talk about them and advocate for them, especially as a Latina, because I know mental health is definitely stigmatized in my culture. And we just got to talk about it, baby. We just got to talk about it. So I'm here to do so.
Yes, Isa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story, especially as a Latina, and how that's formed your journey as a woman, as someone who struggles with mental health. I think that's so important, and I'm very excited that you agreed to come on. Isa and I met when I was in college. Our friend Hunter lived in my dorm, and Isa would come and visit us, and we just became friends, and we have the same name, which is kind of crazy. So she's Isa and I'm Belle, and together we're Isabel.
Yeah.
And that's like the whole shtick. That's the moment. So Isa, you kind of brought up about how there's stigma in your culture. I don't know if you want to dive into that a little bit more and give some context for people who may not have that same experience, and maybe something that other Latina girls could relate to.
Oh my God. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, and just like my experience is going to be completely different than any other, like even Latina's experience. And I know that as a woman, there's a little bit more leeway with talking about emotions than there is with men, especially because of this term called machismo in the Hispanic culture. And it's basically just that men have to be strong and have no emotions. Like that's it. You're just strong, and you can't have mental health struggles, and you shouldn't talk about being sad, and you're always just strong. And that kind of lends a hand into the I guess the way that also women think, is that we have to always just be carrying the weight of the house. And I mean, it's similar to American culture in the sense that it's definitely a lot of cooking, cleaning. Those burdens are put onto women. And I definitely saw that growing up, but not just with gender roles, because I think that's the case in most cultures. But what really stood out to me my entire childhood was how the Latin culture views women's bodies. And in specific, my family's Colombian. And like, you know, you have the classic Colombians who are like Shakira, we have like Carol G now, like all these women, like basically just to put it in short terms, like if you don't like something about it, go get a surgery. If you don't like your nose, go get it fixed. If you don't like your butt, go get a BBL, girl, you know? So that's BBL energy is like everywhere in Colombia.
Yes, and it's such a deadly surgery. I don't know why everyone's like, yeah, BBLs. Like, no, maybe
Like
not that.
sumo deadlift, just like garbage. But again, I mean, that's basically the culture there, and everyone wants you to be happy and thin, and you know, like I was 10 years old and I was told, this was in Spanish, but I was told like, you know, you're fat, but you're a pretty fat girl. And I was 10. And the man who told me this was my cousin's boyfriend, who was like 22, 23 at the time.
Ew.
And so, like, there's no filter. There's no lack of, I mean, there's no sense of empathy. Um, and it's just very toxic because you have to be thin. You have to have like the Hispanic curves. Um, and there's always something that isn't enough. And especially I saw that in my family in specific. Like I could have been super healthy on paper, but I was just overweight. But the issue is I was overweight. I lose weight and now I have a bunch of health conditions, and it's like, oh, you're skinnier now, but now you're sick. So it's just like that theme of never being enough, and there's always little comments like, I remember I had like a zit on my forehead and I went to go visit my grandma, and my aunts were like, oh, you got bit by a mosquito. And I was like, no, girl, it's just acne. I'm like 18. Um, and so it's just things like that you're just like, it gives me the ick. I'm like, why? You know, there's no filter, but there's also people are always saying things, and people always just don't want to talk about anxiety and depression. And I mean, I can go on and on and on and on.
Right.
Yeah,
Me
that's been
too.
my experience, where it's just like you kind of get scared to talk about your emotions and your struggles, and especially talking about things like sex and when you become sexually active, which is completely natural. And like growing up in the Catholic Church, I mean,
Yeah.
the whole snowball effect. And
Yes.
so there's really a disconnect there when, you know, especially me with my parents when I was younger, talking about mental health. But because I studied public health and I was able to kind of study psychology, we definitely talked about mental health more. And yeah, it's become less taboo in my household.
I feel like a lot of times women, especially like daughters,
Mhm.
especially now, are bearing the brunt of like trying to make mental health a normal conversation in their household. And I think that's something that I've dealt with a lot
Yeah.
because in high school, when I told my parents I was suicidal, I don't think that's something that they ever thought they were going to deal with their kid having thoughts about killing themselves.
Mhm.
And it was a huge shift in talking about mental health, and I think that it sort of paved the way for my family to be a little more comfortable talking about it, but it was definitely a struggle at first. And I know that a lot of women, and it's reflected a lot on social media, I think a lot
Mhm.
of rhetoric, and I see it on TikTok the most,
Mhm.
about how women feel like they're changing their families, especially when it comes to being more open about talking about
Yeah.
certain issues. What I gathered from what you said was kind of like your culture and the Colombian culture. I'm not sure if it's specifically that or if it's all Latina culture. Um, they're okay being very open about certain things, and then on the contrast, other things they just don't talk about. Was that confusing to you as a kid, or?
Yeah, you don't really know the boundaries of what to say and what not to say. I mean, like I can go to my aunt's house and they're like, "Oh, your butt looks flat," or like your shirt isn't cute, or like those are not flattering. You look fat or something like that, you know? Um they have no issue saying that. But as soon as someone is struggling with something, it's like, no, they're fine, just be happy. Like my mom has said to me, and this I love and adore my mom, and things have gotten much better now, but it's like, Mom, I'm sad, I'm tired, I'm depressed. And she's like, just be happy. That kind of energy.
Mhm.
So there is a lot of boundaries about what you can and can't say. And it does get confusing because at the end of the day, you either shut down or you expel all of the feelings and emotions that you're feeling, and that can cause a rift between your family because they weren't ready to talk about it. And that's also a boundary that I respect with my family, is that um because they didn't grow up in such a normalized, mental health society, pro mental health, I have to kind of guide them into the conversation about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely blurs the boundaries a little bit growing up. But I think things like social media, honestly, like TikTok and Instagram, can be tools that we can use to kind of like learn how to talk about it a little bit more, um, as toxic as it may be.
Yeah, but I love watching your TikTok videos. I think they're great. Stop. I think they're so good, and it's because you're
Thank
just
you.
really being honest about your your day and your life. And I think that making videos about being in the gym and about your weight loss journey and that transparency is something that is really needed, because on Instagram you have all of these models who are editing their videos, editing their pictures, and I talked about this in my last podcast with Brooke. But having people who aren't afraid to break that boundary of just, I don't even know what how to refer to it, but
Perfection.
to break the boundary of perfection and really just be authentic. And that's what changes these situations, because if
Mhm.
you're coming from a place of experience, that's really hard to invalidate. Um, and people can try, and they will try, and I'm sure they have in your life and they have in mine, but that doesn't mean that you can't keep working and hope that one day it's gonna like break through, and
Yeah.
people are gonna people will get it one day. People will get it one day.
Yeah, we're on the way there for sure.
I think so too. I really hope so. So, when you were having these conversations with your mother, with your family, how do you wish they had responded initially? What did you need from them?
Oh my God, just support. Just support instead of thinking that I was the problem, say maybe there's something else. Because a lot of the times the way that you obviously you know this, working in mental health, is that just projection can be so deadly sometimes.
Mhm.
And so your fear as a parent of of thinking I did something wrong, I did something to my child that messed them up,
Yes.
is that now my child is screwed up and that's because of me. But oftentimes that's not the case at all. I had incredibly loving parents that spoiled the heck out of me and loved me to death, and two older brothers who just did the same. Yet I still had, from when I was little, I had panic attacks, and I still suffer with panic attacks now. And at the time when I was telling my parents, like, hey, maybe it's not temper tantrums because I'm like 19 now. Maybe it's something called anxiety. I wish, instead of them saying, no, we all just get a little nervous sometimes, or just be happy, I wish they would have said, okay, what do you need? And if you don't know what do you need, let's work on it together. What would help you feel more calm? What would help you feel supported? And I definitely think that that's something I want to do as a parent. If I notice that my child is going through something, or they tell me they're going through something, is just being there and listening is sometimes more powerful than trying to come up with the answer.
Yes.
So I just wish they would have listened a little bit more. But they do now, and that took time, and that took me having to break down. And it's like working in a court case sometimes. It's like you have to provide evidence that you're anxious. Um, like my parents, once I married Josh, my husband, once we got married and we've been together almost 4 years. Once my parents saw that he was kind of my witness, so to speak, um, and he would tell them, this girl is anxious AF. Like this got out of her depression and like you guys need to help her. Like he sees that every single day. And like I'm not just in my room at my parents' house, I'm in our apartment. And like he sees like my depression room and like he sees my panic attacks and he sees all of that. Um and so he was able to kind of vouch for me, which I appreciate and I'm so grateful for, but at the same time, I wish that I would have had the same validation of vouching for
Mm,
myself
yeah.
than my husband vouching for me. But at the end of the day, I'm still grateful that they listened. And like I said, like I had to provide evidence. And once my parents saw me have a panic attack and I was on FaceTime, like they were like, oh, okay, let's get you into therapy. And right there, it switched. But yeah, I just wish that I wouldn't have needed that kind of evidence. I wish they would have just taken it, you know, just from what I was saying. I wish they would have taken it more seriously, but it takes time.
Time is definitely really helpful, but at the same time, like, it is difficult to feel like you need to provide evidence for the things that you're feeling. And because mental illness is something that under the surface, it's not something you can see. With physical ailments, like if I'm coughing, you know I'm probably sick.
Mhm.
Or if I broke my leg, you can see my leg is broken. But if my mind is not working properly, if I'm depressed, no one can see that. Maybe they'll see that I can't get out of bed or I'm having trouble eating, but they may just think that oh, she's just tired today or
Yeah.
she's just not hungry.
Mhm.
But it's so much deeper than that. And the evidence is so hard to provide when people can just attribute it to other things.
Mhm.
And the other thing that's difficult, especially with anxiety, is so many of your thoughts are intrusive and you have to provide yourself evidence that they're not true. So you're providing evidence to yourself and talking to yourself to try to fix the fact that you're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And then you're also trying to prove to other people, "Oh, hey, like I like this is a real thing. I'm actually dealing with it." And those things kind of conflict
Mhm.
and it's confusing because like yeah my anxiety is real but the thoughts that I'm dealing with aren't, and that's like kind of a confusing thing, especially when you're a teenager and you don't know how to navigate that. And now like being in therapy, I feel like I have much better tools to do that, and I still struggle with it really hard. My therapist always says to me, well, what evidence do you have that that's true? And I'm like, Elizabeth, I don't know, I don't have
That's a
any.
good question.
That's an amazing question. I wish I
Mhm.
could answer it, but I don't know. So it's like really hard to vouch for yourself in a situation where you already feel like you don't have power.
Yeah. And I love what you said of just like providing evidence to yourself and to others. And sometimes we just feel like we have to validate our feelings so much
Mhm.
when at the end of the day, it's like, I'm just feeling this way and it may not have a purpose of why I'm feeling and I may not be able to pin it right now, but I'm just going to sit in this feeling and I'm going to be mindful about it and then I'm going to change my feeling because it's not serving me. And so it's really hard to find that balance, especially like you said, when you're young and you're going through changes as a woman, which suck. And being in the
Yeah.
teen and teenage boys and girls suck.
Mhm.
And you're going through this like crisis when you're in high school of like, this is like my life and this is it. And if I don't go to this party, I will die. And it's like you just start having these thoughts of like, they are intrusive and you're like if these people don't like me then what's the point of my life if this boy doesn't want me then like I'm worthless. And so
Mhm.
going through that and then your anxiety, your hormones are changing, your body is changing, your mind is still developing. And when you don't have that parental support and all your other friends are feeling that way, you're just in a hole and you feel like you can't get out. And so yeah, therapy is, girl, like the tools that you get in therapy, you can be completely like not mentally ill and go to therapy and still just get tools about how to better your life.
A lot of people think they're not mentally ill and they are, and that's the other that's the other
Well,
problem
we
is
are
people want
meant
to
to
deny
be.
that.
Yeah. We're
Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was cutting you off.
Oh no, it's all right. I think that at the same time, like even as someone with mental illness, I'm sure it could be the same for someone who isn't diagnosed with a mental illness.
Mhm.
I find out things that affected me when I was like 2 years old that now I'm still dealing with, especially like in terms of like attachment issues
Okay.
and those sorts of things. Like,
Mhm.
oh, this thing that was probably not a big deal. Like, someone telling me on the bus when I was in the second grade that my ponytail was bumpy, like, you would think that I would have forgotten that, right? Like, that was in the second grade. I was like, what, 7? And that still affects my self-image today. I was in the second grade and I never forgot that. There's so many things that we don't even remember. Like, I remember that one. Can you imagine how many other things people said to me when I was a kid that have still affected me?
And they just sit there.
And I'm sure that's especially difficult when it's your family. And so, like, for you, growing up in a culture where people will just say things because that's part of the culture, there's probably things that you don't even remember that may like still really affect you, and especially body image wise.
Yeah, I mean, it's not ever just things that people say to me, it's the way that you watch people as well, like what my aunt said to my cousins, what my aunt said to each other, and what what people the way that people interact, and like that stays with you. And like I remember looking at my cousins and they got a lot of attention and praise because they were skinnier and had like long straight hair and got boob jobs. And so I remember they got a lot of attention and praise, and my family always spoke highly of them, and I just wanted that validation and that attention. I looked up to them a lot, and now looking back, they had their own issues that they were dealing with regardless of being praised so highly. And so that just started teaching me, and that's something that I look back now at 22 years old. I'm like, yeah, the validation of other people really doesn't mean that much,
Hmm.
but it does to me because of these experiences.
Yeah.
Um, so and that just sucks. So
Right. And I know that body image and weight loss is like a huge part of your story. That's
mhm.
something that's really like on your heart.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, go ahead, say what you feel you need to say, girl.
Oof. Let's see. Where do I begin? I will say, and I just want to preface before talking about this, is that you do not need to lose weight to be healthy. And your weight does not equate to your health. And
Purr.
weight does not equate and weight does not equate to your worth either. And I
Absolutely.
know this is something that you advocate for a lot too.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I was overweight my entire life. Like I was a chunky baby, like Pillsbury Doughboy chunky. Um, and looking back now after therapy, I've been in therapy for over a year. Um, I wish I would have started sooner, but
Me too.
at least we started at some point, and like it's
Yes.
gonna help. We're
Well,
still so young.
just to, like, interject quickly, we'll
Please
get
do.
back to the point,
Yeah.
but this is a crazy statistic that, like, literally blows my mind. Um, it on average, between initial symptoms and treatment, there's a 10-year gap
Holy
in
shit.
America, and it's
Wow.
so long, so long.
Wow. And I believe it too. And I
Yeah,
mean, that's probably, again, the average. And there are people who have waited much longer to go to therapy.
absolutely.
Um, I feel like our generation's a little bit quicker to get to it, but I believe it. Holy crap. Yeah, that's a really important statistic because we were experiencing things when we were in the second grade
Right,
and in the third grade. And like now here we are in our early 20s getting treatment.
right.
Yeah, so I was really chunky and um overweight my entire life. And when I was little, and this is again like I'm not sure if it's like the Latin culture, but my mom was like, okay, we like she needs to lose weight. She needs to lose weight. She needs to lose weight. And that can come from a place of like making sure that your child is healthy. But at the same time, like I was healthy, I was just chunky and I loved food. She put me on those like protein bar diets,
Oh,
like
no.
diets. I remember going to like a nutritionist, and my mom was like, if you get down to this certain weight, I remember it was like 100 pounds. And I was like probably 8. And like that's a little bit on like the higher end of weight, but like I was okay, I was just chunky. And she was like, I remember if you get, and I remember like looking at the scale too. And I remember being like, I have to get to 100 pounds because my mom said she'll get me a puppy. And like there was that connection there has stayed in my mind. Like if I lose weight or eat good, I'm gonna get a reward. And it's like, no, like you should probably just do that just for your health. And if you don't want to, then don't. I had experiences like that throughout my entire childhood. Yeah, so I definitely had an oil fixation when I was younger, and that stayed with me until now,
Mhm.
honestly. And binge eating. That was something that I wasn't able to like actually pinpoint until recently, that I actually had a binge eating disorder. That kind of continued from the time that I was like really, really little, until recently. And I also went through a time. So I was really chubby, like just as a little girl. And then when I went through puberty, I this was like in eighth grade. I went to three different middle schools. So I grew up in Florida, in West Palm Beach, and I went to one middle school in sixth grade, and then I went to a private Catholic school in seventh grade, and then I went from in seventh grade. Right after that finished, we moved to Virginia, and so I moved to Alexandria, Virginia, and I went to a middle school there. So three different middle schools definitely made me the extrovert that I am. So grateful for that, but also its own struggles. And so when I was in eighth grade, that summer right before then, I started like really going through puberty, and like I had a huge growth spurt all the way to 5'4". So
Per. Oh, she's a giraffe. Hey.
oh yes. And so I uh random thought, ADHD, I'm sorry, but I shrunk ever since I lost weight.
Like like height wise?
Yeah, I was 5'5" and I'm 5'4", so
Oh. Who
whatever.
would have thought that would happen? That's crazy.
Yeah, something I did not expect with weight loss. Anyways, so yeah, I started going through puberty in eighth grade. Wow. And I started kind of developing my curves.
Mhm.
And I started losing weight like rapidly. And I was finally like, oh my God, I'm skinny. And so without knowing and growing up in a toxic, not a toxic household, but I think a toxic society where it taught you like, if you want to be skinny, just don't eat. So I
Mhm.
stopped eating in eighth grade. And I remember I would eat like an orange a day. I don't know why I picked oranges. I think it's because like what we had. But I picked an orange, and like that's what I would eat. And at this time, everything is intersected, whether it be body image, I'm so sorry,
You're fine.
whether it's my mother, whether it be body image or your mental health or suicidal thoughts, because I resonate with you there. I had to go through that a lot in middle school and high school. I had friends who were um, going through really, really tough times, and all of my close friends that I made in eighth grade, they self-harmed,
Mhm.
and that became normalized to me, and so I started self-harming in eighth grade. um Thank goodness that it didn't escalate. It was something that I did because my friends were doing, and that's I thought that I needed to do that. And so I'm grateful that I was able to not go further with it, from eighth grade. That had a whole role on my body image. And I had like my first crush in eighth grade.
Mhm.
And like there's just so many factors that in eighth grade, being 13 years old was pivotal for me,
Mhm.
because I lost so much weight and I wasn't eating, I was self-harming, I had a lot of body dysmorphia. Um, and so that kind of snowballed into high school. And my sophomore year, I started eating a lot,
Mhm.
like just binge eating out of control. And so I gained I probably gained like 90 pounds from my sophomore year until of high school until like my senior year of high school.
Wow.
And it was a lot. And like, gaining weight is not a negative thing.
Mhm.
But I viewed it as that. And it went from not eating to binge eating. And so in high school, body image is huge, girl. I mean, like, we've all been through it, and
Yeah.
we all want to be skinny and we all want to be this and that, which is not true. And we know that now. But at the time, it was everything.
Yeah.
And I wanted like guys' attention. And I wanted like, I just wanted to be liked. And I never really had that in high school. It was here and there. And I blamed that on myself. And
Hmm.
I blamed that on my weight. I projected and I was like, I'm confident, and I projected on others as well. And I was nice in high school, but I was also a little bit rude sometimes, because I had this fear of rejection. And so yeah, I that went into college, just like that body image and just like being like, I'm not worthy because I am overweight. And that led to like really poor decisions my freshman year of college. And yeah, it was really, really hard. Those were really, really hard times from like eighth grade until my freshman year of college were horrible times because I was going through something that, hormonal changes are completely natural.
Yeah.
Um, but binge eating and starving and self-harm and those things are things that, and also I started drinking alcohol when I
Yeah.
was like 15. Oof. Yeah. And so those are, I have like a billion stories that I could talk about in just this one timeline.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's how it normally goes, right?
Oh my God. There's just so many things that intersect. And so
Mhm.
my body image issues really like I can kind of stem them back to really starting in eighth grade. So yeah, now getting to the question of weight loss. So when I was a freshman in college, I had tried to lose weight by myself. Like I was in and out of the gym throughout high school. I tried to eat healthy, tried to do the whole like green juice thing. Um, but it always was like temporary fixes, and I always ended up gaining any weight that I lost back.
Mm.
And I thought that losing the weight would fix all my issues at that time. So my mom um, suggested a gastric sleeve operation in Colombia because that's kind of where they specialized in this. And I had a couple of family members who also had the gastric sleeve operation. Um, and so I was like, okay, let's just do it. And so what it does, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but they basically like take your stomach and like liposuction and stuff like that kind of just like takes the fat out of your stomach or out of like your adipose tissue. But what the gastric sleeve operation does is it takes your actual like organ, like your stomach, let's say it's this big, they take about like 75% of it to make it about like that big.
Oh, wow.
So they actually like shrink your stomach so that you get full quickly,
Mm.
and you don't eat as much. And so it's just kind of like portion control. Um, and yeah, I had that gastric sleeve operation done in, when was it? July of 2018, I
Oh,
believe.
wow.
Yeah, so I
That
was
was like right
I was
after we became friends.
yeah, exactly. Like I literally had my whole freshman year of college,
Mhm.
and then I got it right before our sophomore year. So I had it done then, and I stayed in Colombia for a couple of months recovering. And then I came back, and within it was really hard. It's not an easy fix, honestly. It kind of like snowballed into its own, had its own implications. I have lifelong anemia.
Mm.
I have like issues with my cholesterol, issues with just even just like my body dysmorphia has like worsened since I got my surgery.
Mm.
But there are also a lot of great things. I lost 80 pounds. I started going to the gym and weight training. We love strong women in this
Yes, we
household.
do. We are both buff girlies.
Yeah, I love it. And lifting honestly was like one of the best things I could have done for my mental health. Yeah, so after my freshman year of college, I begun my weight loss journey, and that has its own like whole narrative around it.
Mhm.
Especially losing weight in college. Um and I couldn't drink alcohol.
Oh,
Which was probably like the best thing that happened to me.
probably a good thing
Uh
realistically.
Definitely borderline alcoholic my freshman year of college. I will admit that, but um yeah, it I didn't drink anymore. Like I barely drink now almost 4 years later. It's usually just like a glass of wine at that. I'm such a lightweight. Um, yeah, so that with the weight loss journey, there's a lot of things that you don't expect
Yeah.
when you go through that, especially like men, why? Like, why do men? Was my question. The amount of comments that I got from like college guys that were like, "You lost a lot of weight, didn't you?" And I'm like, "Thank you so much. Sherlock Holmes, I am so glad that you're here today. Thank you."
Nancy Drew
Like,
could never.
yeah, you like what? I was like, and it was every day that someone had to point it out. And
Yeah.
like I had a lot of people coming up to me or like reaching out to me of like, how did you lose weight? Even guys themselves too were like so curious as to how I lost so much weight. And I was always really transparent about it. I was like, I got a gastric sleeve operation, like get over it. That's it. That's all that happened. But it was one of the best decisions that I made. It really turned everything around for me. But it was hard.
Yeah. And I think like after you lose weight, even though you feel more comfortable because you think that your worth to a certain extent lies in how much you weigh. And then for people to make comments about that and comment on, oh, like you're smaller now, and you notice that people treat you differently, and that's something
Mhm.
that happened to me because at the beginning of quarantine I started working out because that was something that I did for my mental health, and eating healthier and really like investing in my physical health was something that helped me maintain my mental health. And because it's all connected, because we live in one body and your mind and your body are connected. And so your physical health and your mental health are literally just your health. Yeah.
Period.
So I started working out, and like I was never someone who was overweight. I was never overweight, but I wasn't happy with how I looked. I wasn't happy with how much I weighed, which was really ridiculous because like I was fine. But
Mhm.
even so, when I lost like 20 pounds between when quarantine started and when I went back to college, like having friends say things to me about, oh, like, where did you go? You disappeared, or like commenting on how I looked was so uncomfortable because I just didn't want anyone to perceive my body. I
Mhm.
don't want anyone to talk about my body. I don't want to know that anyone's looking at it. It's uncomfortable, and it's way better to just not say anything about anyone's body, even a compliment,
Yeah.
because you don't know how that compliment could really affect them. And it's backhanded. It's saying like what you were before wasn't enough for me, but now that you're smaller, I appreciate your
Mhm.
body. And like that is not something that you ever want to hear because you don't want your worth to be attached to the way that you look.
Yeah, it shouldn't be either. And like when you see someone, your mind is all like it's immediately going to think about what you're physically seeing. And so if someone looks different, you're going to think about it. But you don't have to say anything about it
Exactly.
unless you know how that person feels about it and it comes up in conversation.
Right.
But those backhanded compliments, yeah, definitely like they're backhanded for a reason. It's like, oh, you lost so much weight. That's great. Okay, but why? It's asking that question of like, why is it great? Is it great because I look better and I'm more like appealing to you now? Or is
Mhm.
it like the amount, and you get this because like also going to the gym and like your appearance changing, and there's nothing wrong with not being happy with how you look.
Right.
It's getting to that question of why you don't look happy, and it's I just don't feel good, and I know that what I'm doing to my body is not helping me physically, mentally, emotionally.
Right.
And so it's saying what's going to help that. Okay, going to the gym. And why am I going to the gym? I want to go to get stronger. I want the endorphins. It's going to
Mhm.
help with my serotonin boost. It's going to help with this and that and sleeping,
Yes.
but it's not because I'm doing it for anyone else other than me. And like even in the gym, like do you get comments of like how did you get your your muscles so toned, and how do you do, like I had this girl come up to me, she was like, girl, what is your workout routine, because you're like Jordan Woods over here, like you look so good, like your butt's so big. And I was like, thank you. But also like I don't know why I was kind of offended by it. I don't know. I was like I felt uncomfortable, like you see, like you
Yes.
said, I felt uncomfortable with like someone looking at my body.
Yeah, I don't like it's such like a weird dichotomy, but also my gym is a lot different. It was when I used to work at a gym and it was like a commercial gym,
Okay.
so um It was definitely a different environment, but now I go to, like, my community center gym,
Okay.
and I go at 5 in the morning because I go before work, so I'm up at the crack of dawn, and it's me and, like, a bunch of old white guys, like, it's not it's not a situation where people are really talking to each other, like, the
Yeah.
dudes will bro out, but everyone kinda just leaves me alone because 'cause I'm, like, the one girl lifting in,
Yeah.
like, super, like, masculine.
Thank goodness.
So, yeah, and it's always really fun for me when I'm, like, lifting and, like, my back row is more than the guy next to me, and I'm like, "LOL, sorry, just get big like me, bro." But
I am buff.
but no one really comments on that stuff to me
Okay.
personally, and I'm grateful for that. There's just not a lot of women in my gym,
I
and
can
the ones who
imagine.
are normally go later in the afternoon. So, I don't experience that, but
Yeah.
I do think that if someone said something like that to me, I would I would be uncomfortable.
It's like thank you, and like, especially because I feel a little bit more comfortable because it was a woman, and so I was like, okay, and she was genuinely interested in like bettering her body or like bettering her health, and so I was like, okay, like I'll help you out and stuff. But yeah, I was like, there's more to a person than the way that they look. And it's funny that you mentioned working at a commercial gym because I don't know if you're familiar with One Life Fitness.
I
But
think I've seen it, but there's not one near me. I think there was one in Harrisonburg when I lived there.
yeah,
Maybe.
I worked at a Gold's Gym, and that turned into a One Life Fitness, and that's like a whole other podcast in itself. I go to a gym now that's more, it's like smaller, not necessarily like physically, but like it's not commercialized.
Mhm.
um and I love it, and a lot of the times I go with my husband and I'm like the only woman in there, so I feel that. But there's a lot of times too that like other women go and like get training, and there's a boxing gym and stuff like that. But I just think it's really interesting that um just the difference of like commercialized gyms and even like a community center gym.
Yeah, and, ugh, I could go on and on about
Oh,
working at the
same.
gym. I could,
Reel it
I
back
really
in,
could.
reel it back in.
Reel it in, take it back. Yeah, but it's definitely uncomfortable to have people talk about your body, and that's something that um we have to confront as a lot, like, within the Miss America organization, is because people just really see it as a beauty pageant still, and it's not. It's a scholarship
Mhm.
competition. But there are people within the organization that still really struggle with their body image regardless of the fact that we've taken beauty out of it, and people who are outside of the organization looking at us and thinking we need to look a certain way, be a certain way, and that's not reality. And on the internet, I notice about, like, other women in the organization, especially state title holders, who have people comment on their bodies like that's okay. And it's way worse on the internet because people think they can hide behind a screen, but, like, it is never appropriate, good or bad, to comment on someone else's body.
Mhm.
Never, never.
You don't know how it's gonna affect them too, and I also wanna bring to light, the recently passed, and I feel horrible because I cannot remember her name right now. She was a former Miss America, I
Miss
believe.
USA,
Miss
Kelsey
USA.
Christ.
I just wanna bring
Chelsea?
her.
Chesley?
I do not remember, but I do wanna bring her to light, and I wanna say rest in peace and acknowledge the fact that it's not always about how many people like the way that you look, and you can
Absolutely.
have a seemingly perfect life and you can still struggle with mental health,
Absolutely.
and oftentimes it can take a life. And so you have to be very mindful. And a lot of people say, well, things are so sensitive nowadays, you can't say anything. It's because we normalized saying everything. It's because we normalize that as a society.
Right.
You have to be sensitive about things. You can't just because at the end of the day, you could literally ruin someone's day because of something that you said to them.
Mhm.
And I personally, I do not want that burden on me.
No.
And so because I know what it's like when someone says something to you and you fixate on it for weeks, months, years, decades, like your story about your hair on the
Yeah.
bus.
Mhm.
You have no idea how someone's going to hold on to something you say. And so something I always try and do is just spread kindness and be compassionate. Kindness and compassion are so important and so undervalued and represented right now, especially like in mainstream media. Um, and so yeah, just being careful about what we say to people can always help. And I really would have appreciated that during my weight loss journey.
Yes.
Um, but it definitely, I think grew some tougher skin on me because at the end of the day, I kind of know how to navigate things better. And I know how to talk about what I'm feeling, and I know how to identify them and analyze them and work with them and not against them. Um, so that definitely helped. And just going through any change, even like cutting your hair, everyone always has something to say about it.
Yeah.
Just like, why? It's just hair, it'll grow back.
Everyone always has something to say about everything. And you know what? At the end of the day, if you're happy with how you look and how you feel, that's what matters. That's where it should come from, if you're happy with it.
Exactly.
And as long as you're working from the things that make you feel fulfilled, that's what matters. Like that's something I dealt with a lot when I changed my career path from being an actor to now psychology is when I was acting, I didn't feel fulfilled. I love musical theater. I love acting, but I wasn't happy.
Hmm.
Like I love doing it, but as a career, it was not giving me the things that I need to feel fulfilled in my everyday life.
Right.
And I at first like I really felt like a failure and I really felt like I was giving up and like I should just keep going because I got my degree in this. It was what I wanted to do as a little girl, but now knowing like this is where my heart lies. It lies in
Passionate.
it lies in mental health. It lies in changing wellness in our country, in our world. That's if that's what's going to fulfill me, it doesn't matter what other people think. People can think I'm a failure for giving up. That doesn't like to me, I don't feel like a failure. I feel like I'm just getting started. So, like
Of course.
that's just one example. It doesn't just have to do with your body. It can deal
Yeah.
with any choice that you're making. People are going to say things and feel things and think things, but they're not living your life, you are.
Exactly. And it also adds like a deeper layer to how what you can bring to the table well as a mental health specialist. And you can talk about your brain, like use your experience in theater. And I mean, I think you are extremely talented.
Thank you.
I think you are extremely talented. And I think it's something that if it wasn't fulfilling you, it's okay to change because most of the time we do not use the degrees that we got. And
No, we do not.
but you have a degree, girl. You
Yeah.
have one, and you're doing so much. And honestly, like I'm inspired. And this is what I told you is that I'm really inspired by you because
Thank
you
you.
said, listen, I have a degree in this. I've been doing this since I was a little girl. This is something that I love. And performing, I miss performing because I did musical theater in high school,
Right.
and I love music and singing and performing. But oftentimes I'm on the other hand where I've been in public health and I don't feel fulfilled because I miss performing.
Mm,
And so you have to be able to find that balance of being like, what can I do with my performing? What can I do with my talents? But
right.
also what can I do with my knowledge and with my skills? And it's like, which one becomes a hobby? Which one becomes a lifelong purpose?
Yeah.
Um, and so it's really important. It adds a deeper layer because you can say, hey, we don't all have to be like have degrees in psychology and we don't all have to be experts, but we can all talk about our struggles and we can all shout our struggles.
Oh, purr! Pitch! Way to pitch it, girl!
And she said the title.
Swish, swish.
Yes. So honestly, that was like I felt like Eminem or something. I don't know. I felt like Jack Harlow in the studio. Um, and so yeah, I think that it just brings such a deeper layer to your story and what you can provide other people too. And that's
Beautiful.
amazing. And something I yell about all the time on TikTok is being multi-passionate and multifaceted. And you can be pretty and smart, period. You
Yes.
can you can be like extremely knowledgeable, but also chaotic. Like you can be multi-passionate. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we need more multi-passionate people because things like niching down or just being in one single field, those are all things that keep us in our lanes. And it's like, don't stay in your lane anymore.
Yes. Something
Sometimes, yes.
yeah, something that my coworker Frank is just I just love Frank.
Frank.
He's really great. We love Frank and he will never listen to this, but um something that he says to me at work is like you have to think outside the box inside of the box.
Yeah.
And it's normally about how to like navigate things with students not being on campus, but it applies to everything. I think that's such great advice. Is like you have to think about how can I use the limitations I'm given to create something new and better that still like will work with what we have.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's why I think using social media is such a great way to do that. And
Yeah.
like you're really like popping off of the algorithm and like this girl just hit 1,000 followers on TikTok. Hey.
I'm so late to the game. I got TikTok like in March or April, and I was like, I should have been on this app like 2 years
Yes,
ago.
but you're so dedicated, and like the fact that you got it in March or April and you're already at 1,000 followers. Like I've had my TikTok for like 2 years and I have 550 followers. Like I
Girl, do not let comparison be the thief of
no,
joy.
I know, but I'm just saying like it's really
Oh,
impressive and it's
thank
good that
you.
like you're using your platform for all of the wonderful, amazing things
Thank you.
that you possibly can. So
Thank you.
we're getting down to the nitty-gritty.
Yes.
We have like 5 minutes left. So
Yeah.
anything that you would like to say, it could be something that you'd like to say to Issa as a child. It could be something that you just want other people to know. And then you can also pitch your socials as you should. Promotion, promotion, promotion. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Oh my God. I mean, I could write an entire novel of what I would tell young Issa, but what I would tell anyone who is listening or anyone who needs to hear it is, oof, let me gather my thought. It's all over the place in my mind. Okay. What I would really say is to find joy. As simple as that. And as simple as it is, it's also extremely complex. And we need to be able to find our joy. And I am in the pursuit of joy. And I find that through, as toxic as it may be, through social media, through building communities, through podcasts, through talking about our struggles in my field in public health, in performing. I find joy in going to the gym. I find joy knowing that I had to live the challenges that I had to go through. And I find joy in knowing that I overcame them, but knowing that I will overcome any struggle that I'm going through now. And it's just to find joy in the little moments, to practice gratitude. I thank the universe and myself for who I was because it is still who I am. I'm just more developed. I've just been through more. Um, and it's just to find joy in everything that you do and to be compassionate and to be kind and to listen, um, because it is more powerful than we think. Per.
Yes.
Um, and if you want to hear more about it,
Good
my
segue.
my Instagram, and like I'm kind of like giving up on Instagram because it's kind of becoming a very toxic environment of like perfection and like all that kind of stuff. But if you want to follow me on there, Isa_Kristen, and TikTok, where you can hear me yell about this stuff all the time, is Isa_Kristen 22.
Oh,
She changes it up.
she threw us a little curveball. Hey.
Gems, things like that.
Oh, and before we end the podcast, happy Pride Month to everyone in the LGBTQ plus community.
Happy Pride!
Happy Pride! Have a great month. Okay, so that was the Shout Our Struggle podcast for this week. Thank you so much, Isa, for coming on and sharing so many wonderful things. Such a wise, wise woman, and I love her so, so much. And we will be back soon. Maybe not super soon, but soon.
You're a
So
working
stay
woman.
tuned. She's a working girl. All right. Bye.